Now, for the record, before I ask you your full name, let me thank you, Warren, for joining us here today and giving us the time. What is your full name?
Warren Joseph Swensen.
And who's responsible for giving you that handle?
Well, I guess my parents, Margaret and Carl.
Okay. What's your present family situation?
I'm married to Gail Swensen, who was formerly Gail LeGrand. I have 4 children and 2 grandchildren, with another grandchild on the way.
How about, since they're going to see this, why don't we name all of the children and give me their birth order?
Okay, it's Eric, Kurt, Krista, and Leslie. And the grandchildren are the daughters of Eric and Michelle. And they are Kayla and Paige.
Now, we don't want to leave anybody out, but can you talk a little bit about each one of them, their personalities, maybe the talents that have manifested themselves or certain qualities?
Sure. Well, Eric is the oldest, and well, I don't think you can speak about Eric without speaking about Kurt, because they grew up so closely together. For the most part, for their earlier years, they were constantly fighting with each other. All right. I can remember every time I brought Eric to the hospital after Kurt had beaten him, he would always say, "Why me?" All right. He would always be the one who was bleeding. All right. Because Kurt would just pick up objects and just throw them. And, all right. They went to school in Sachem. They graduated from Sachem. They tried college a couple of times. Eric started out as after college. He went into carpentry, did some home improvements, and decided that work was a little tough for him. So he went back to college, got his degree at Nassau Community, became a respiratory therapist. All right, then met his wife, Michelle, and now Michelle works at Mather Hospital. Eric is at St. Charles Hospital, and they're both doing very well. Eric right now is continuing his education, and he wants to become a perfusionist. And he seems to be quite motivated towards that.
What is that?
A perfusionist is a person, he's a technician in the operating room who will control, during a cardiac event, will control the blood and the oxygen level of the patient. So he's similar to an anesthesiologist, except he's handling all the circulatory and respiratory events. So it's quite an impressive profession. Kurt, right now, he's down in Florida. He married a lovely girl, Elizabeth, and he's working now with Pepsi-Cola. And he's working towards becoming one of the district managers. And so he's doing very well. Krista went to Fordham University. She continued her education after Fordham, and she now holds a degree of the MBA, and she works for Chase Manhattan in the credit department. And Leslie right now is at Duquesne University. She's graduated. She's continuing her education, and within a year she'll be a physician's assistant.
A lot of medicine there.
There's a lot of medicine.
What about the grandchildren now? What qualities or traits do you see beginning to emerge?
They each certainly have their own identities, strong personalities. they're very thoughtful youngsters. They think, you can see them actively thinking of solutions to problems, and they have a good time together. They're Kayla and Paige play so nicely together.
Mm.
You know, they are very good friends to each other.
This sounds like a wonderful success story unfolding here.
Well, it's had its bumps, of course.
Right. Well, who hasn't? You have a lot of family contact?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Where were you born, Warren?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York.
What part of Brooklyn?
Well, I was originally from Avenue C
Mm-hmm.
and 5th Street, and then we moved to Flatbush from there.
Mm-hmm. And then eventually, after Flatbush, was that when you moved out of the family?
Right. I got married to my first wife,
Mm-hmm.
and we moved out to Long Island,
Okay.
to Ronkonkoma.
When were you born?
July 18th, 1944.
You would have been a Roosevelt baby then.
Yes.
Uh-huh. You have, no doubt, some very early childhood memories. Can you share some of them with us?
Sure, I can remember my mother drowning me. No, that's not true, Mom. I can remember the old neighborhood. All right, I can remember my brother and I. My father was a superintendent of an apartment house. I can remember we were rather poor. All right, my oldest brother, all right, who Johnny, he worked for National City Bank, and he had to help out with the finances and also work around the house. All right, Johnny's about 18 years older than I am, and he was 8 years older than my next oldest brother, Charles. All right, so I can remember. I remember one event. It was just before Christmas, and my mother and I were out, and we were shopping, and the day before, I had heard her talking with my father about the insurance, that they had to pay the insurance, and she asked me at the store what I wanted for Christmas, and I told her, well, why don't you use any money to pay off the insurance? You know, it's as a kid, that was a memory that I think most of us had. That we were sort of tight for money. Towards the end of the month, we would be eating Spam, or it would be eggs and some sauce or ketchup, or noodles and ketchup, or cheese sandwiches. It's sometimes we even had cereal for supper.
The period you're talking about is no doubt the late 40s, maybe into the 50s.
Right, yeah.
You were born after the Depression, but your parents had survived the Depression, so that they were impacted by all those experiences.
Yeah, my father was a rather unique individual during the Depression. Well, he was born in Norway, and he left Norway when he was about, I guess, 14 years of age. His family couldn't take him anymore. He couldn't stand his family, and he went to sea. And he learned to be a fisherman. He was a merchant sailor, and he stayed at sea for quite a while. But during the Depression, after he had married my mother, because there was no money, he would go back to Norway and he would fish. And in about maybe 6 weeks, he would earn about $2,000, $3,000. And then he would come back to America. And that was quite a bit of money. He would make the money for the year almost.
As a child, You must have had more than your share of dreams, of hopes or of dreams. Did you have?
Well, yes, I was. I remember I was very interested in medicine. You know, I wanted to be a doctor, and I started out at St. John's University as a pre-med student. I was doing pretty well, but then I had a medical problem there for a while, and I had to leave school. And then I just didn't have the motivation when I went back to continue with pre-med, because I had lost my class, and I would have had to wait an extra year. So I wanted to move on.
It sounds like medicine was just a generation ahead in your family.
Yes.
Yeah. What was your mother's maiden name?
Van Wart. She was Dutch.
Uh-huh. Did your father and mother meet here then?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. My father, I guess, pulled into New York as a port of call, and he met my mother.
Do you know anything about your mother's family history, like her mother, father? Did you ever meet your grandparents?
No, but there's and this has been proven.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you'll enjoy this. One day, the Daughters of the American Revolution came to our house, and they wanted my mother to join their chapter, which was rather ludicrous at the time because of the money situation. But my father, because he was a superintendent, one of the things that he always bartered for in his in the job was that he had to have a very nice apartment. All right, and he would take a salary cut just so that he could have like a 6-room apartment, and we always lived in nice quarters. Well, these ladies from the Daughters of the American Revolution came in, and they wanted my mother to join their chapter because they had done some research, and they found out that she was related to Alex Van Wart. And Alex Van Wart was one of the soldiers who captured Major Andre, and one of 3 soldiers. And Alex supposedly was the fellow who slit the booth to find the plans to West Point. Right? History suggests that he was just looking for money, and that the 3 of them were actually deserting from the forces. Some are soldiers. They were on their way back, and they took the plans to a general, and they tried to sell the plans back, to obtain some money for their, but they were thanked for their bravery, and so Alex gets a footnote in history. All right, he probably wanted a couple of $100, but he gets a footnote.
You've mentioned one already, but do you have any other childhood memories of your mother that you can share with us?
Oh, it's just that, my mother always held the family together. I was sort of sickly as a child, in those days. At one point, I had pneumonia, scarlet fever, and rheumatic fever. And supposedly this almost took me to my maker. Mm-hmm. So I can remember her caring for me. Mm-hmm. I can remember a thing that that some sadists invented for children during that period called a mustard plaster. All right, and I can remember that you used to boil this thing up, and then it was you would place it on the child's chest. But I can remember lying in bed and seeing my father come at me, juggling this this towel, and I realized that they were going to throw this thing on my chest. So that was rather a vivid memory for me. And Christmas was always a joyous time.
You mentioned your father's ethnicity and his background. Did you ever get to Norway? Have you ever met his parents or family?
No. I met his brothers, and they were. His sister Augusta lived in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn, the Norwegian ghetto over there. And one summer we went up to New Hampshire to meet with his family. There was Olaf, Joseph, and I realized that my father was a lot more liberal than they were. He was pretty easygoing. Let me...
Comparatively speaking.
Yeah, let me go back. I can remember we went to it would be my cousin's house, and my father refused to get out of the car and go into his house because he didn't know how to spell his name. On the mailbox, he spelt his name Swenson, and Norwegian is the last part is Sen. Right. So he wouldn't go into the house until he took the mailbox down.
Yeah. Wow.
And they did it for him. So.
You mentioned before, you alluded to your two of your older brothers. Name all the siblings. Name
I have three older brothers. Okay, Johnny is the oldest. All right, then comes Charles and Edward.
Okay. Talk about each one of them a little bit.
Well, Johnny's was... being the oldest, a lot of responsibility fell on his shoulders, and being the family of a superintendent, you had to do a lot around the house. We had about a 48 family apartment house that we dealt with, so there were a number of problems. My father was meticulous about keeping the apartment house clean, so 3 times a week, the landings, 6 floors of landings.
Was this in Flatbush?
Yeah. Had to be done. At that time, we had incinerators, so you had to put out the ash cans 3 times a week. You had to wash the steps once a week.
Is the building still there?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Right. And we had these brass doors, and that had to be polished once a week. That's when I became familiar with Noxon. Yes. And it was a full-time job for a family. And Johnny took upon a great deal of this himself.
What did Johnny do with his life?
Johnny once he came out of the war, Johnny went into the war when it first started. This is World War II, of course. He joined the Navy, went through the entire war, was in every major campaign, Atlantic and Pacific. And he came out with a chest full of battle ribbons. And he was on the USS Texas, which was bombed twice. And he led quite an interesting life. Once he came back from the war, he got a job at, it was called Bankers Trust, I think, and then it became National City Bank, and then now I think we know it as Citicorp. And at the age of about 18, 19, he became a teller, moved up to chief teller, and he became a vice president when he moved to Wall Street, and he retired from the bank.
And your other brothers?
Well, Charles, I think you know Charles. Charles was, he went to St. Peter's College, graduated, came out to Long Island. Well, from St. Peter's, he won the Fulbright scholarship and went to France, Grenoble, France, spent a year there. Came back, got a job at Sachem. Sachem didn't appreciate him too well, and I think they asked him to leave. He came to Brentwood, became very good friends with a fellow by the name of Dr. Sheely and John Maroka and the Marians, Greta and Hank Marian. And I can remember Tom Dwyer there. And he established himself well in Brentwood. He became a GIS at North Junior.
As a general instructional supervisor.
Right. Okay. Moved on after I came out to Brentwood. He went to Hofstra University, became a supervisor of student teaching there. Then he moved up to Jamestown, became a superintendent of the Jamestown School District, and then moved back down here, and he became superintendent of the Westbury School District, from which he retired. And he's now at St. Joseph's College as a director of student teaching in the elementary level, I believe.
The Swensen family has left their mark on the Brentwood School District?
Yeah, I hope so.
And
Edward came to the Brentwood School District from St. Peter's College. He started at West, taught for about a year, and then he was promoted to GIS, and from West, he came to the Sondling building, Sondling and Ross building, as a vice principal under John Maroka. There was the first year that they tried to computerize the high school. There was a lot of blame thrown around, and I believe Edward became a scapegoat for anyone from Stony Brook University to people working in his own office. And Edward decided to leave Brentwood, and he went to Central Islip as an assistant principal. Did very nice things over at Central Islip. Central Islip at the time was having a great deal of difficulty with student unrest, and Edward devised a plan, right, for the security, which he now uses in his program. He now has a business. Let me see if I can get this straight. District School Security Systems, right? And he's the president of that. And from Central Islip, he moved on to Rocky Point, where he became assistant superintendent of schools. And he retired from there.
So between the medical field and the educational field...
Oh, we've got it locked up. No, there's no problem.
It must have had a lot of influence on you then, in your career choices. I mean, but in addition to your own siblings and your own family, were there other adult influences that played a part in your...
Well, I think my brothers were very strong influences on me. Johnny was a strong influence on me. All right. I think Johnny sort of taught me discipline, and a work ethic. Right. And also a great deal of loyalty. Right. Charles actually taught me how to become a teacher. Charles, my first year of teaching, was not very auspicious. It was extremely hard work. As a matter of fact, after my first year of teaching, I wanted out of it so badly. that when I started teaching my second year, I took 2 days off. I didn't go into school the first 2 days because I was in New York on Wall Street looking for a job. And but I realized that it was pretty difficult to get a job on Wall Street with just an English certificate. And so I came back to Brentwood and buckled in again, and it was still hard. At the end of my second year, I was still making a number of mistakes in the classroom. And I think English is one of the hardest disciplines to teach. It's Tom Campy used to talk about English as being so amorphous, and it is. You know, it's because I have taught social studies, and I love teaching social studies. When I was involved in the R.O.B.S program, I taught social studies for a year, 9th and 10th grade social studies. And I loved it. And I found the kids very responsive to it. And there was something about it that was, I guess, so empirical that but English, it's the preparation was so difficult, and there was always the judgment of the students that was.
Was there a point in time, Warren, though, that you knew, I'm going back now a little bit, when you knew teaching is what I want to do? I recognize you had periods of indecision afterward with the difficulties, but at what point, was there a particular point when you thought, yes, that's what I'm going to do?
Well, I think I backed into it.
Okay.
It was something I had to do because I had 3 children.
Okay.
All right, and I wasn't going anyplace. All right, now that's
okay.
After my 3rd year of teaching, I decided that something happened. I realized that I could do things in the classroom.
Okay.
That I really had control, all right, of what I wanted to do. And we're not talking about, I never had any problems as far as discipline, but teaching or being satisfied with what was happening in the classroom. I was never satisfied until around 3 or 4 years into it. 5th year, I thought was great because I was, I was in total control of it.
Yeah. Teachers obviously have profound influences on the people who come through their lives in and out of the classroom. Do you remember any of your primary or secondary teachers?
Yes, sure. I loved high school. I had a great high school experience. And I can remember Mr. Casey. He was an English teacher, and as a matter of fact, he even used some of his lines today. He always used to, if you ask Mr. Casey what was up, he always used to say the 2nd floor. And I find myself doing the same thing. And students get the same response. It's almost universal. The wry humor of it. I can remember, my science teachers, but we had so many good teachers, and I went to St. John's Prep, and I'll tell you, it was one of the great 4 years of my life.
Now, you had a built-in job because your father was a superintendent. You worked around the property and the buildings a lot, but what was outside of that responsibility? Do you remember your first paying job?
Sure. It was at R.O.B.S Delicatessen. I made 25 cents an hour. It's delivering groceries and stocking and cleaning out the basement, which I hated to do because of all the little people waiting for me down there. I couldn't stand bugs and rodents.
Yes. What were you interested in, Warren, as a kid? What were you a reader or a sports enthusiast?
No, ironically, I didn't like reading. As far as sports, was the Yankees. The Yankees were the team. We living in Brooklyn, it's so different from living on Long Island. Now in Brooklyn, you get a couple of guys together. You could play a stick ball. You could play punch ball. You could play slap ball. You could play stoop ball. You could go down to parade grounds and get a baseball game going with anybody. You play football on the street. Sewer to sewer. It's something that the basketball. You go into a playground and you just picked up a game of basketball.
Were you into music at all?
Well, the music, the contemporary music, it was rock and roll.
Oh, sure.
I was into certain pieces of classical music. Yeah, okay. I got that from my education at St. John's Prep. Yeah, we had a music appreciation once a week on Friday.
Yeah. Cars are a part of the American ethic too. As teenagers, were you involved in automobiles at all?
No, for the most part, I didn't own my first car until I came to Brentwood. It's somebody. My brother had given me a car. He gave me a Comet. God, what a pig that was! And. I would drive the family car, but once again, there was no money, for me to go out and buy a car.
The world events that were significant and that happened during your formative years, which of them stand out in your mind, or which ones can you remember that?
Well, we were always at war. Right? I can remember. Well, my brother, not that I can remember him returning from World War II, but earliest recollections of war was the Korean War and Joseph McCarthy and communism. And of course, I was for Joseph McCarthy because he was against, the Red Peril. And, after then, one of my heroes was Douglas MacArthur, and you were against Harry Truman. How could he possibly think about firing Douglas MacArthur? And then you were into Dwight Eisenhower, and Eisenhower again, a war hero, the general. It's but with Eisenhower, you saw a weakness. I think during his presidency, he was. Nixon had to take over twice for Eisenhower, and then all of a sudden you're into Vietnam, right? And you're at war again, and for the most part you're against the war. It's the first time that people started lining up against their country. It's a very divisive situation. It's even people who started out for the war, right? There was a turnaround. So
we're living through a period now where there's a great concern with violence of young people, particularly as concerns schools and education. Do you remember the assassinations of the 68 or even earlier than that, of the Kennedy assassination?
Oh, sure. That's the day you always remember where you were. And yeah, sure. It was a lot of people cried on that day. Now when you go back in history and you see John F. Kennedy, and his life and perhaps what he accomplished, there wasn't much there. But still,
people say the past, you can't change the past, but you do change the past as you learn more about it. You change your opinions of the past.
Oh, sure, your perceptions.
More about you. Are you a morning person or a night person, Warren?
Oh, morning. It's even this year, my last year of teaching, I was here every day around 6 o'clock, 5:45, getting ready for classes.
You don't anticipate that to change then?
Probably not. R.O.B.S, I think, said it in, who was it, Gargantuan and Pentagram. that this is when the mind is awake in the morning. He would take his student out, and they would. I think he even gives a time of about 4 or 5 in the morning, and they would take them out to the river, and they would bathe, and then they would go back, because by lunchtime the mind begins to fade away.
Do you have a favorite season?
No, not really. See, we have, Gail and I like to go to so many places. We have a house up in the Adirondacks, and the Adirondacks is such an interesting place. In the summer it's different, in the spring it's different. So in the winter, so this year we were up for Thanksgiving with a couple of friends, and it was just incredible. The people didn't understand what the Adirondacks is like during the fall. They thought it was just such a wasteland. So I think the Adirondacks has taught me to appreciate all the seasons.
We haven't talked about Gail, and I'm glad you mentioned her, because I want to have you. How did you meet? How did you guys get together? And tell me about Gail.
Well, I met Gail when she came to Brentwood. She was a young teacher, and. Tom Campy, a good friend of mine, had always taught us to, help the younger teachers. And this is something, because teaching is so hard, and you can't do it on your own. I had to do it on my own for the most part, because that was only because of my own personality. Charles was the one who helped. But when Gail came to Brentwood, she was such an innocent, sweet kid. And she was so smart. Oh, she was, she graduated summa cum laude, and she had all sorts of accolades from Long Island University. So we more or less, we became instant friends, and we had a group of Steve Crakel, Vince McDonough. You're talking about eclectic grouping. This is the way Brentwood used to be like, which it's returning to, which is nice to see. But old, new, young, we had a great time. And Vince McDonough, he was our dean. He was our intelligentsia. He would steer us, the right path. No matter if it was labor negotiations or if it was Cicero, he would be there.
What year did you first come to Brentwood?
66.
Mm-hmm. Why Brentwood? Was that because your brother was here?
Yeah, it was easy.
Yeah.
It was easy to get a job here.
What had you heard about the district, either in or outside the family, before you arrived?
Just that it was a very creative place.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time you had the Ford Foundation here, so it was very geared towards education. And when I came here, I realized it was very progressive. I fought that because I thought they were too progressive, that they were getting away from some of the rudiments of education, especially in English. They were talking about transformational grammar, rather than staying with the traditional type of grammar.
But you had mentioned that you were still, I suspect, very conservative at that point, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was.
In terms of your politics, at least, you were conservative, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Who interviewed you for your first position?
Oh, well, it was a number of people. They went through. I think I had a practice interview with Jeff Dwyer, and then I saw Fred Weaver. There was a fellow. I think Manny Vega was involved in it. John Dion, I think.
Joe Dion, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I was, by the end of the day, I had the job.
Okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't really a problem.
Do you remember any of the questions that you were asked?
I remember Jeff Dwyer asking me, what would you do in a classroom if a student told you to go fuck yourself?
Yes.
And I asked him, that's the type of students that you have here in Brentwood. And he said, no. And the question was dropped. So it's, I always realize the best way to respond sometimes is to attack.
You mentioned that you had a difficult time for the first year or so, which I don't think is terribly unusual. But you must also have some good memories from those first couple.
Well, I remember my students. I can remember Kathy Fogarty. Kathy Fogarty, at the end of classes, she would tell me, says, Mr. Swensen, you aren't that good today. And I said, well, what was wrong? And she would tell me more or less, some of the things that I had done during class, which she didn't like, and she was right. Yeah, she was right. I can remember my first year, I had a student who, I always thought I had a very good rapport with students. And I remember this one time, it was third period, first row, third seat. I went down the row just checking the desk because Clem Stanzik always used to come in behind me. Clem Stanzik he wanted those desks on the line, and he would check the desk for graffiti. And I remember this girl had written on the desk, "I hate Mr. Swensen." And I can remember being so crushed by that. But that was an important lesson. All right. What had I done? And I realized that, found out later that I said something, as a joke about her dress or her hair, something like that. And she allowed me to apologize later for it. And something you don't realize in the classes, that you have 30 people in front of you, and sometimes you say something stupid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you have a favorite year of all of the years that you have been in the classroom? Was there one or 2 years that stand, one year in particular?
Yeah, this year, no. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. You must have been involved in other activities outside of your classroom. You must have been asked to sponsor. What were some of the things that you engaged in? Oh,
Gail and I ran we helped with the play, the musical, the production of the musical. We put on about, I think, 7 or 8 plays. That was always a wonderful experience. We worked with a fellow by the name of Maury Burns, and Maury was just an incredible director. I watched.
Was Bye Bye Birdie one of those?
No.
No. What do I remember?
It was Pajama Game. There was Pippin. Okay. There was Oklahoma.
Sure. Okay.
Fiddler on the Roof was absolutely the best play.
And Yvette Zimmerman's son was...
Right. It was Tevye. He was, we were at auditions, and Eric, I think his name. Eric got up there, and it was incredible. We all looked at each other as, that's it. You don't even have to bring anybody else up. This is Tevye. And he was such a leader behind the stage. He was incredible. And we had a lot of problems behind the stage. The fiddler got drunk one night. And I remember Rod Lynch's had to hold the fiddler on the roof of, I think it was the Friday night performance. It was pretty interesting up there.
Hey, do you think your training, your ed courses, prepared you for what happened when you got into the classroom?
No. There was one ed course. There was a woman, I can't remember her name. She was from Hunter College, but she was a department head from one of the city schools, and she was terrific. She prepared us for a class. She would have us do lessons in the classroom, and that was good. All right, my student teaching assignment was I received no supervision whatsoever. It was, that was one of my problems. That's why whenever I'm asked to take a student teacher, I'm always a little reluctant because it's some people wouldn't agree with this, but I find taking a student teacher so difficult because of all the time that it involves.
Very demanding.
Also, you have to turn your classes over to that person, and that's sometimes difficult.
Yes.
But I realize that as teachers, we have that responsibility, and when we take on that responsibility to help out these student teachers, we have to do an extremely good job with it.
Outside of the job description, which is, of course, a matter of public record, what did you see as your mission, your purpose?
Well, actually, being conservative, I always realized that I was being paid by a taxpayer to do this job. And my first priority would be to make sure that that taxpayer got his money's worth. All right. Now, that's ahead of all these speculative aspects of education, all the hypotheses about education. That's, you got to get, the taxpayer should get his money's worth for what he's paying. Then, of course, I wanted education to be somewhat fun, but I wanted to teach something. And sometimes, the worst thing you hear in the classroom is a student telling you how boring something is. But then sometimes you realize that, well, this isn't necessity. That's where back in when I first started teaching in the 60s, the worst thing you could do in a classroom was to be inflexible. All right, you did not want to be rigid in the classroom. And I could understand that to a point, but that laid the groundwork for getting rid of grammar, forgetting about spelling. And I think we've all heard that education is cyclic. Okay, now all of a sudden we're back to it, and on the Regents, you see the word grammar being used as one of the criteria for judging good writing. Right, so it's education certainly is cyclic in that.
Have you maintained contact with any former students that you've had? Do they keep in touch?
No, not really. The older you get, I think the more students start cutting you off. When I was younger, students used to come over to our house. They used to babysit for us. We had a very good time. I was best man at a student's wedding. We used to be invited to weddings, engagements. But then at the same time, students come to you with, I think this, more serious questions because they think you could perhaps answer them. More questions about life experiences. So that's, you keep your contact that way.
Warren, what makes you angry?
Well, I haven't been angry too many times in my life. One thing that makes me angry, as far as education, is when people make judgments about other individuals based upon their own rigid values. One of the greatest problems Brentwood has is their supervision. There are very few supervisors in Brentwood. There are a hell of a lot of evaluators, and they don't understand the difference between supervision and evaluation. And there can be, the two of them can exist together, right? But they don't have the time for, and sometimes it's Well, sometimes it's the union's fault many times, because the union has established its rules about evaluation, right? And I can understand we're protecting our members, but sometimes rules that we have established as a labor policy, you got to remember that we're also involved in this thing called education, which is a rather creative pursuit. And sometimes these our goals collide, right? And we blame the administrators, but we as teachers have to take the blame also, all right? Because administrators, if they say something, all right, that can be construed as offensive or threatening, all of a sudden it goes to the union office. And I think that's changing, right, with our new teachers coming in. And I see a lot of good administrators now. You know, it was a time when we won't name people, but there was an administrator who came into the high school who absolutely destroyed the continuity of this school. Alienated administrators and people with political.
He unified the entire district, the person you're talking about, against himself.
Yes, but people who had political ambitions, they jumped on the bandwagon, and they cut their own colleagues. Okay, and these people right now are, you know, in high positions. Yeah, but you know, they saw their opportunities. You know, these are the people who are in education to make some money, and also, but they like the leadership role, which, you know, there's a need for it, right? But sometimes they don't realize that there are certain criteria for the leadership role.
Who's your favorite comedian?
Geez, I don't know. I think probably Bill Cosby. You know, when he was not now.
When he was doing stand-up.
When he's doing stand-up, when he's doing those records, yes. The recordings. He was
that's kind of a backhanded way of asking you a different question. I wanted to ask you, and I will ask you, what makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh? Something that's funny.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know. It's sometimes it's just the joy that you see. Okay. You know, it's somebody's. You know, various things can that you laugh.
You became a member of the Brentwood Teachers Association, I assume, early on. Were you ever active?
Well, I was building a representative. You know, it's tell you the truth, I never had time.
Yes. Yes.
It's with 3 children.
You bet.
Took me a while to get my master's degree. And there were always extra jobs. It just didn't have time. But it's sort of something for almost like a single person. You know, it's.
Was there ever a time that you were afraid to come to work?
Oh, sure. What, are you kidding? We're just talking about this, the riots of the 70s. We had 3 days of riots here. That was a very scary time. All right, the first day of the riot, I was sitting with Guy DiPietro. We were sitting, he was having lunch, and I was sitting, and we were talking, and a student walked past with his shirt off, and he was slit right down his chest. And I said to Guy, Guy, we've got a problem here. He said, what do you mean? And I said, there's a boy walking out there, and he's bleeding pretty badly. And I remember the fellow, he was white as a ghost. And then we ran out into the halls. The halls were in absolute chaos. There was one fellow who was being brought down the hall, and they were holding his ear on. And a lot of blood. I remember being in a room with a kid who had this, we had to disarm him. He had a very big knife. And then the next day, I really didn't want to come to this place because you knew what was going to happen. And it did. I remember, and our principal at the time was a fellow by the name of Alfred Miller. All right. Now, he lasted about a month. I remember being in his office because at the time I was moderator for the National Honor Society. And we were talking about something concerning the Honor Society, and he asked me, I was looking out his window, and I saw all these students with bats and chains and tire irons, and they started marching from the Ross building towards the Sonley building. And he asked me, he says, Warren, why aren't those students in class? This was about 7th period. And I looked at him and I said, this is my leader. I said, well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Miller, I think they're about ready to riot. And at the time, there were certain students were heading out the back, and these other students were coming. The police, thank God for the police, the motorcycle patrol officers, they came screaming into the parking lot, and they set up a cordon around the school, and they arrested, I think, 70 some odd students that day. And the third day, we had more rioting. Right, and after the 4th day, things quieted down. I guess
this would have been in the late 60s, would it?
It was, I think it was 1971, 72.
Okay. Which of your many accomplishments are you the most proud of?
I think this year, it was really nice being voted Teacher of the Year by the National Honor Society. All right, and another thing that this year, just a couple of minutes ago, I found out in April that there was this one student who I really care for, a young lady. I found out she wasn't graduating because she hadn't passed the RCT in reading, and nothing was being done for this child. And we started working together, which really, of course it's my job as a teacher, but it's the job, this is a pet peeve of mine. The reading program at Brentwood High School has, it's non-existent. Okay, we used to have a person by the name of Kay McDivitt, and this person used to come around to our classes, and she would ask us, all right, is anyone who has reading problems? I want to see them. I will set up a class for them. And this woman would teach kids how to read. All right, she was a reading consultant, and she believed that this was her job. Well, anyway, I found out about this young lady, and we worked, and I didn't think she was going to do it, right? Because I speculated that she was going to fall about 5 questions short of passing the test. So my wife and I decided that perhaps we'll have her take the new Regents exam. All right, and she did that, but also she was the Regents now is 2 sessions. So she took the first session of the Regents, then she took the RCT in reading. And today she just finished taking the last session of the reading, but I got her reading score from the lab, and she passed. And to see the smile on that kid's face while she was taking the Regents, to know that she was going to graduate,
Yes,
that was a big thrill for me.
Oh, great.
It's one thing that I strongly believe in education is the democracy in education. We see so many programs and teachers who will only teach a certain type of student, such as, okay, well, I teach the AP course in English, so I get the best students. But I also insist on teaching the 9th grade repeat classes, so I get I think the most challenging students. Now, the idea of having a teacher who will just teach for a particular group, now that works also the other way, where sometimes teachers don't work hard enough because you give them these students that aren't challenged, all right? And I always enjoy seeing students such as, my 9th grade repeats when they say, how come you're teaching us? It says, you teach the AP classes. And I think it helps them. All right. And Mike Bannon is another teacher like this. He's that he insists that he get some of the lower
Correct me if I'm
students.
wrong, but Fred Weaver is still working at the evening school and working with kids who are...
He certainly is. The man is amazing.
Who are failing RCTs and working on remedial students and so on, even at this point in his life.
Fred is an amazing man.
Yeah.
He's an honorary fellow, but boy, it keeps him going.
And we've also, your memory of Kay McDevitt jarred my memory, and then I remember that we had a reading program with George Cavuto for many years.
George, I never worked with George Cavuto, but from what teachers have said, Castor Howard, Betty Stosey, Cavuto was a terrific individual in that reading lab.
What is going to be the actual date of your retirement, Warren?
Well, it's 6/25.
Okay, so we're coming down the wire now.
We're grinding it down. Yes.
Yeah. How long did you know that you were going to retire before you actually submitted your papers?
Well, I knew I was going to retire. This year. All along.
Okay.
It's.
Did you feel any different once you put in the documents
No.
and once the decision was made?
No, because
Okay.
I've been talking to other teachers. It's interesting. Some teachers go out well, some teachers don't. It's almost like a Hemingway short story. All right. John Bogle gave me some of the best advice. He said, your last year, enjoy it. Don't get bitter about anything. He said, if you go out bitter, that will be your memory, and it will stay with you for the rest of your short life. And I think he's absolutely right. I've seen teachers who have gone out and they were bitter. They hated they hated the children, they hated and they weren't always that way. It's, they wanted out.
Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to leave now?
Oh, I have other things. You have to go on. It was becoming very difficult waking up in the morning and going out to teach. I think most teachers, once a class started, it was interesting. I would never know what was going to happen in that class. You have your preparation, all right, but then some things will work, some things will not. As an experienced teacher, okay, when they don't work, you can, you can save it somehow. All right. Once in the classroom, in front of a group of students, I always had a good time. All right.
What a great thing to be able to say.
Yeah, but I didn't like getting up in the morning to come here. It was it became laborious.
How many years total did
33.
you? 33. And your culminating building assignment, title, position, schedule?
Well, I work in the Sonley building, teacher of English.
Okay. For 11th, 12th?
Well, I have ninth grade classes, and
Ninth
then
grade,
I have
too.
seniors.
Remember the 10-week courses that English did?
Yeah, it's too bad that. Well, that was our fault. We could still have them, but we, as teachers, we didn't work hard enough trying to preserve them, trying to generate them. You know, it was our fault.
Speaking of working hard enough, did you ever have to hold down a second job?
Oh, sure.
What did you do? What were some of the things that you did?
Oh, when I first started, I worked at Hess up here at what is it, Suffolk Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
During the summer, I had summer jobs. I had night school jobs when I was younger. Oh God, there were some nights that at least two or three nights a week, I only would get 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and then I would have Kurt. Kurt always he was a colicky child.
Oh,
so. Kurt and I would sometimes land up in the living room in this green rocking chair, and that's where I would wake up in the morning, you know, with Kurt in my arms. You know, it's and then it's off to school.
Yeah. Yes. Do you remember what you earned your first year before taxes?
Sure. I made $5,900, which came down to $80 a week. And as you've heard from many other teachers, that was fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's you know, it was a comfortable salary. Gas was what, 40 cents a gallon. That sort of drives the economy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was a good time.
What was your favorite time of the school year? Sounds like you don't have, or it almost appears you didn't have a favorite time.
No, I
was there a least favorite time then?
Well, I think this time, you know, it's 2 weeks before the end because everybody's fed up with it. You know, everybody wants to get out, and this year I had one of the finest closings because this year I really pushed the students to take the AP, and we worked pretty hard, right, during the year. So, and once the AP hit, you know, they said, "Well, we're finished, right? You know, now we're in, you know, May 18th or something." And I said, "No, we're not finished." Then, well, what are we going to do? And I said, "Well, we'll just enjoy ourselves. We're going to read a couple of plays, and we're going to do that." And it was very comfortable,
yeah,
you know, finishing up.
Yeah. Given a chance with what you've learned overall, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Well, I think those first couple of years, I think I would have tried to have done differently. I think the teachers today are a little bit better prepared for what they come across. Now, Brentwood at the time, they handed you a book and a book list, and they said, "Okay, here are your books." Yeah. And you know, once again, you know, I've deferred to Charles, who really helped me through. Yeah. And Manny Vega was a pretty influential in my career. He doesn't know that, but
there are, we've mentioned books several times, and you just alluded to books again. I wonder if there's one book that you can mention that you've read that was either important to you or that moved you or something.
Well, I think I always forced myself to try to teach something new. Yeah, because it's, you know, as teachers, we become very contented with, you know, doing the same stuff over and over again. And very early in my career, I used to throw my lesson plans away from the previous years, or I might have lost them. But I never started anything with the same lesson plan. I remember, except for one book, Huck Finn, I always used to keep it, and the file became so thick that one year I gave the book out, and I said to the kids, I don't even know how to approach it. You know, but an important book for me, it's a rather new book. I started teaching Toni Morrison, right, Song of Solomon, and Drusilla, Toni Morrison, because she's become such an important writer in American literature. You know, she's so similar to another author I like, F. Scott Fitzgerald, who I enjoy. I enjoyed teaching The Gatsby. You know, and if you take a look at The Gatsby and you take a look at her style, her writing style in Song of Solomon, they're you know, you can juxtapose these two writing styles. They're just incredible. You know, she's got the Nobel Prize, but she's going to become such an important figure in American literature. And we haven't had too many important figures. You know, we've had Norman Mailer, you know, which really John Updike, who nobody understands. We have I think Toni Morrison is going to be you know, breath of fresh air for us.
What are you going to miss?
What am I going to miss? I guess having fun with the kids. You know, it's kids this year were incredible. I don't know if it was because they knew I was retiring, but I had some of the nicest kids that I can remember.
What won't you miss?
Well, as I said, I won't. The one thing I will not miss is preparing for classes.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just such a pain to prepare all the time. You know, it's a constant thing.
yes.
It used to make me. Well, it even makes me angry when you come to school and you see certain people who don't have to do anything during the day to do do their job. I mean, they just sit there and nothing happens. You know, and here you see, and I hate to say it's predominantly English teachers who are busting their hind ends, right, getting ready for classes, trying to come up with ideas. How do I teach this? How do I bring
what many people don't realize is that's a 12-month effort as well. You never stop.
Well, I remember when Gail asked me to take the AP on, and I had 5 years left, and I said, no, please do not do this to me, because I knew it was going to be the entire summer gone.
Yes.
And I said, go find someone else. Everyone, and I try to use the excuses. Everyone will think it's favoritism. You're just picking on me because I'm your husband, you know, and you want me to have the best classes. And she says, no, that's not true. Nobody wants it. Wow. And I said, oh, I'm sure you could find somebody. And when Shirley Smith left, nobody wanted to teach the AP. Not one English teacher wanted. And the reason for it is that they did not want the
volume of work.
Yes, they don't want the preparation for it. And I don't blame them.
Yes.
You know, because as I said, you see so many people, and that's one of the ways that we just waste our resources in the schools. I mean, to tell me that so some of these individuals, work all the time as being, you know, if there's, you know, my pet peeve is the reading program. I think, you know, just within the high school, we could get people to donate a period a week to go in and help in the reading lab. But nothing's happening. Okay. But just to, you know, we could, well, with one of my...
You're answering my next question, by the way, and that is, what would you most like to have accomplished that you didn't or couldn't see?
Well, one of the things that I want to accomplish in the future is I want to see if we can get the BTA retirees to come into the school system. And I mean, here you have your greatest resource.
We have such a program. It's just a matter of doing it.
Yeah, it's to bring it's been shown down in Baltimore. There's a program, Roots and Wings, where they demonstrate that a student has to know how to read by the time he leaves the third grade. All right, so that the student can be a success. If a student cannot read after at the third grade reading level, as he approaches the fourth grade, he's not going to be successful, and that will snowball into the point that he will become unsuccessful, unproductive. But if you can get a program together where we can get teachers going into the elementary schools and making sure one-to-one basis. This is the thing. It's been more or less shown that if you can get a teacher on a one-to-one basis with an elementary school student, that student will learn. He will not learn as well with an 8. That floored me. I didn't know that the outcome is that, well, maybe teachers do know what they're doing.
Yes.
And that's something that we should take a look at, especially seeing the fourth grade reading scores. And it's not an arbitrary figure that they choose the fourth grade reading or the fourth grade to test their reading scores.
What's your favorite word?
My favorite word. This is Barbara Walters' question.
Actually, it's an Active Studio question.
Let's see. My favorite word. Oh, probably Ken.
What do you think you're going to be doing 5 years from today?
Hopefully standing at the top of my lighthouse. Yes, Gail has me building a lighthouse right in the front of our property. She wants to move the kitchen into this cylindrical structure that I'm going to build, and it's going to be 2 stories high, and she actually has me believing in it. So hopefully in 5 years, I'll be standing at the top of my lighthouse.
Does that mean that where you are living now is near water
Yes.
or on the water?
Yes.
So this would be a real...
Oh, no. This would be...
No, I'm not talking about something of Montauk Point dimensions. I'm talking about it would be a lighthouse.
Well, yeah, we would figure out something.
That's neat. What a great
Oh,
plan.
please. I won't play this tape for Gail.
That's a great plan. Oh. Warren, I can't thank you enough for having taken the time. But before we go, I want to ask if there's anything that I haven't asked that you wanted to make sure that we did talk about and we haven't. Have we forgotten to do anything or talk about?
No, I think we've...
Well, I want to thank you for the fact that you are such an articulate guy, and this has been a sheer joy for me to be privy to. And
come on, you say that to everybody.
Yeah, no. I'm particularly making the point that we've never had a sit down like this ever, and it has been.
You were always the guy
wonderful.
with the mask at
oh, jeez.
Parents Teachers
There it
Night.
is again.
Yeah,
I'll never live that one down.
I know you won't.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.